Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakaha Kodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Micah chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. And these are prophecies dealing with what the children of Israel would be doing when they were back in the Holy Land. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains. And in the scriptures, mountains can be symbolic for rulerships or governments. So that mountain of the house of Yahweh is talking about the kingdom of heaven, ruled by the children of Israel, beginning with Yahweh Shai Hamashiach, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus Christ, and then the elect, the 144,000, and the rest of the righteous 1/3 of the nation of Israel. And it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. And many nations, many heathen nations, shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, and to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. In that day, the only ruling body of law on the entire planet will be the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, found in the scriptures, the Old and the New Testament of the Bible, as well as the Apocrypha. Verse 3, And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. When the children of Israel were back in the land, ruling in the kingdom of heaven, war would never take place on this planet ever again. And we can clearly see that with those people over in the Holy Land right now calling themselves Israelis, none of these prophecies are being fulfilled. For one, the law is not going forth of Zion or the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Over there right now, those people, which are actually Amalekite Edomites, mainly follow after the Talmud, and they have kosher pork over there, and Tel Aviv is known as a pink city, and it's one of the pride hotspots on the entire planet. And also, they have a constitution and parliament completely opposite of the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. And also, you're not seeing people saying, Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh and to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. The majority of the people on this planet aren't following after the ways of those Amalekite Edomites. They're not following after the Talmud, wearing Shirley Temple curls or a yarmulke, or speaking Yiddish. And a lot of people on this planet are actually against what those Amalekite Edomites are doing over in the Holy Land, constantly oppressing the Palestinians, as well as constantly pushing for war against Iran. And clearly, war is still being fought on this planet. Hey, when those Amalekite Edomites got over into the land, you immediately had the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, then you had the 6 Days War in the 60s, and then what have you seen? The Korean War in the 50s, the Vietnam War in the 60s, those wars fought in Central and South America in the 80s. You had the first Gulf War, then you had the second Gulf War, you had the Syrian Civil War, and World War III hasn't even happened yet. So those Amalekite Edomites calling themselves Israelis clearly don't fit any of the prophecies dealing with what the true children of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, would be doing when they were back in the Holy Land. But those Amalekite Edomites do fit prophecy dealing with what the Edomites would do when they got the Holy Land in their possession. This is Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which is the Greek way of saying Edom, which those Amalekite Edomites are, which have appointed my land into their possession. And how did those Amalekite Edomites get the Holy Land? they appointed it into their possession, beginning with laying the groundwork with the Balfour Declaration in, I believe it was 1917, and then further cementing the deal with UN charters in the 1940s and the Israeli Declaration of Independence, with the joy of all their heart, with the spiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. And I opened up the video with these precepts to preface a clip from RT's YouTube channel titled, Israel-Syria War over Golan Heights Could Be Close, just to further show that those Amalekite Edomites aren't the true children of Israel, and they're not fitting any of the prophecies in Micah chapter 4, verses 1 to 3, because as we'll see in this clip, there is a possible conflict brewing between the state of Israel and Syria over the Golan Heights, clearly showing that war is still on the tables with those Amalekite Edomites in that land. And also, it's showing that the people, in this case, the Syrians, aren't following after the ways of those Israelis because they want to get the Golan Heights back under their complete control from those Israeli Amalekites. And if those Israeli Amalekites were the true children of Israel, those Syrians wouldn't be worried about the Golan Heights, because in the scriptures, when you look at the borders that Israel was originally supposed to have, the Golan Heights was incorporated within those borders. So, you Amalekite Edomites clearly aren't the true children of Israel, and you're about to be taken out of the land during World War III when nuclear missiles hit that place and purge it, cleanse it with fire, getting it ready for its true inhabitants, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who are the true children of Israel, beginning with the elect, to come back to that land and rule this planet righteously under the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai.
Although it's been largely ignored in Western media, Israel and Syria seem to be coming towards the brink of war, as Israel has developed plans to expand its illegal settler population inside of an area called the Golan Heights, which, according to the United Nations, belongs to Syria.
During which she announced Jerusalem's intention to significantly bolster Israel's presence on the disputed plateau,
sparking outrage from the Syrian government, whose top officials have lashed out, claiming that they will retake the Golan Heights by force if necessary, and that this is their right.
Syria said it remains determined to reconquer the Golan Heights region from Israel.
Now, the Golan Heights is an area which roughly spans 500 square miles, but is strategically and in terms of resources extremely important to both Israel and Syria. But in 1967, the territory, which was part of Syria originally, was taken by the Israeli military. And although there was a war again in 1973 where the Syrian military temporarily took over the area, Israel again asserted its dominance and took this area against international law, we have to remember. And although the international community never accepted Israel's occupation of Syrian lands, as they call it, due largely to the fact that it violates international law to acquire territory via war, and more specific.
Just a complete cut to you Amalekite Edomites. If you were the true people of the book, you wouldn't have these organizations like the UN not accepting you annexing the Golan Heights. They would see that, hey, you're the ruling sovereign, so we're going to follow after whatever you do. And like I said, like I just said, when you look at the original borders that the Israelites were supposed to have, the Golan Heights were in it. And also, in that day, there is going to be no United Nations or any other heathen law with authority. Like I said at the beginning of the video, the only ruling authority in that day is going to be the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai.
This occupation of the Syrian Golan Heights by the Israelis violates the UN Charter Article 51. But Israel went ahead in 1981 in December and passed a bill which effectively annex the area. Now, the United Nations Security Council did not agree to this and drafted a resolution which opposed the annexation. And after that, the UN General Assembly has came out and condemned the occupation, but Israel has always attempted to push the boundaries of what it can get away with, even taking more Syrian territory in the past as it's tried to do. Now, when Israel took the Golan Heights in 1967 in the war which they had with surrounding Arab states, they pushed roughly around 350,000 people out of the lands which they had occupied, and specifically in the Golan Heights area, there were thousands of Syrian Druze who remained there. The population of the area right now is pretty much almost a 50-50 split between roughly 25,000 illegal Israeli settlers living across 30 different settlements and 25,000 Syrian Druze who refused largely to take Israeli citizenship and proclaim to be Syrian. And the provocations have not been limited to Israel just occupying this territory, which, by the way, is where Israel gets a third of its water resources from, which makes it extremely important to Israel, because Israel, during the course of the Syrian war since 2011, has struck Syria with airstrikes and tank strikes, utilizing the airspace of Lebanon, Jordan and even Iraq in order to strike at Syrian targets, killing Syrian civilians and also members of the government forces, the Syrian Arab Army, and also allied militias allegedly too. And these strikes have numbered in the hundreds, if not, according to some estimates, over 1,000 airstrikes against Syria. Now, the last time Syria actually retaliated to Israeli aggression and the violation of Syrian sovereignty was back in 2018 when Syria fired into the Golan Heights. But since then, Syria...
And he shall judge many people and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords, weapons into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. No more airstrikes. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, which we're clearly not seeing is the case with those Amalekite Edomites over in the Holy Land. And like I said at the beginning of the video, World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, hadn't even taken place yet.
Has just been utilizing primarily its air defense capabilities to try and keep Israel at bay. After Naftali Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel, announced that he wanted to expand the settler population to 100,000 in the Golan Heights, which would mean that the native inhabitants of the area would actually become a minority there.
רמת הגולן היא יעד אסטרטגי. הכפלת ההתיישבות ברמת הגולן היא היעד של ממשלת ישראל.
And according to some reports, Israel has even been sending tanks to the borderline between Israel and Syria. And all this as Syria is escalating its rhetoric, at the very least, about liberating this territory, which it and the international community believe belongs to Syria. And even in the case of the United States, although Trump backed...
So with this clip, you get the point. As you can clearly see, those Amalekite Edomites don't fit any of the prophecies dealing with what the true children of Israel would be doing when they were back in the Holy Land, ruling in the kingdom of heaven. But they do fit the prophecies dealing with what the Edomites would be doing when they appointed the Holy Land into their possession. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.